Welcome to an intro to a guide to every deck in EDH. So, to start a few things off, we're going to be going through a number of different EDH decks in this series, not all of them, because as you can see, if you look at the number of legendary creatures or planeswalkers that have the ability to be commanders in the format, there are 1,915 legal commanders, and that's not counting all of the various iterations of partner combinations and Doctor's companions from the Doctor Who set, and backgrounds with the background companions like Abdul and his ilk. So there's an absolute ton of commanders. So we're obviously not going through every single one of them. Many commanders are not good or are just worse versions of other commanders, were made before a time when commander was even a thing, so they're not designed for it, or are just not interesting in any way. So for example, I don't think anyone is really pining for a guide to EDH on cards like Barktooth Warbeard or Tobias Andrian, vanilla legends that don't actually do anything. And these are the most extreme examples, of course, but there are many legends that are just straight up uninteresting or are just so bad that they're not worth building around. So we won't be going through every single one, but we will be going through a fair amount of them. The other thing to note is that, of course, there are very, very powerful EDH commanders, and then there are the less powerful ones. And there's, of course, a division between CEDH, which stands for competitive EDH, and then every other form of EDH, which is broken down into casual or high power format. Although I would argue that there's more overlap between them than there ever was before. So for decks that we cover that are not CEDH viable, you could probably upgrade them to be CEDH viable and vice versa. There are many CEDH decks that you could simply downgrade to become more casual or high power decks. For example, lots of CEDH decks simply by removing the Thassa's Oracle combo would become less powerful and probably more viable in a high power format. The next thing is that you're going to see a lot of the same cards appearing in decks over and over and over again. There's lots of staples in the various colors, and you're going to see them a lot as we move on. So rather than covering them every single time we find a list, I would rather just cover them now. So this isn't a completely comprehensive list of every single card that you'll see in every single list, but these are the cards that are going to show up the most often depending on color. So in white, Drannith Magistrate is the best stacks piece against other commanders, and it can show up in any real white deck regardless of whether that deck plays a stack strategy. Then there's, of course, Enlightened Tutor, Esper Sentinel, and Swords to Plowshares. These are the cards that I would expect to show up most of the time in most white decks. Then in blue, we have An Offer You Can't Refuse, Cyclonic Rift, Fierce Guardianship, Flusterstorm, Force of Will, Lorien Revealed, Mystic Remora, Mystical Tutor, Rhystic Study, and Swan Song. These represent the best counterspells in blue, the best card advantage engines in Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study, Mystical Tutor, of course, because the tutors are good in every color, and so on. In black, I would expect lots of black decks to have Ad Nauseam, Bullus' Citadel, the tutors in Demonic Tutor, Imperial Seal, and Vampiric Tutor. I'd also expect Necropotence and Tainted Pact to show up many times. In red, of course, there's Deflecting Swat, Dockside Extortionist. Jessica's Will should show up in a fair number of lists. The Red Blasts, Pyro, and Red Blast to counteract other blue decks. And Ragavan, since it's basically a Monodork in red. Then in green, you're going to see lots of the same ramp cards appearing over and over and over, so tons of Monodorks like Arbor Elf, Avacyn's Pilgrim, Birds of Paradise, Carpet of Flowers, Delighted Halfling, Ignoble Hierarch, Noble Hierarch, Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth, and then land tutoring effects like Farseek, Nature's Lore, and Three Visits. And then, of course, Sylvan Library and Veil of Summer are also going to show up a lot of the time. In multicolor, there are certain combinations where these cards will almost always show up in those colors. So if you're playing a Golgari deck, usually Deathrite Shaman will be in it. And if you're playing a Rakdos deck, usually Fire Covenant will be in it, and so on. And then, of course, the various Mana Rocks. You're going to see Arcane Signet, Chrome Box, Felwar Stone, Grim Monolith, Jeweled Lotus, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Mind Stone, Mox Diamond, Mox Opal, Soul Ring, and then the non-green talismans in many, many, many lists. And then for lands, there's going to be a lot of the same lands that are showing up all the time. So, of course, when you're building non-monocolor mana bases, you're going to see the fetch lands, the dual lands, the shock lands, the fast lands, the pain lands, the commander-specific lands like Training Center that enter untapped when you have 2 or more opponents. And then in some lists, the slow lands and the horizon lands. And there's also various one-off land that you'll see in a lot of lists. For example, Grove of the Burn Willows will probably be in almost every Gruul deck. Then outside of those, other lands that show up a lot are Ancient Tomb, Cavern of Souls, since making your commander uncounterable is very relevant in most decks. The straight-up rainbow lands that tap for any color, such as City of Brass, Command Tower, Mana Confluence, and Exotic Orchard in most circumstances. And outside of that, you'll see a lot of the same cards in the mono colors or just alongside those colors in various decks, such as Boseiju, Otawara in the blue decks, Urborg in black, and many, many more. So most of the time, I will not be going through every single one of these cards unless it's specifically relevant to the deck for some reason. Also, these decks are built and analyzed based on the assumption that you're playing in a 4-player pod. Of course, Commander games can be more or fewer players. Sometimes you'll have 3, sometimes you'll have 5, but most of the time you should have 4 players total, including yourself. So analysis of the deck and construction of it will be done from the standpoint that you have 3 opponents. Now, aside from all that, there are some definitely good resources to use when deciding to construct EDH decks. EDH Rec, short for EDH Recommended, is a great site for building commanders. It can show you the top cards in each color, the top commanders, and you can search for specific commanders and cards and figure out what cards are used in those decks. So for example, if you wanted to make a Feldegriff deck, you would just search for Feldegriff, and then it'll show you all of the cards that are played in various Feldegriff lists, the high synergy cards, the cards that are played most frequently in the list, the most frequently played creatures, instants, sorceries, the utility artifacts in the lists, the lands in the list, and so on. So this can be a great resource for building decks. Secondly is a site that I would like to refer you to, Commander Spellbook. This is a search engine for finding combos. So if you're interested in a specific card and you want to figure out if it combos with anything, you can search it. So for example, let's say Kiki Jiki. So this will show you all of the combos that combo with Kiki Jiki by popularity, but you can also sort it in other ways. It will show you the colors that you need in order to execute the combo. And then if you click on any of these, so it will show you, here's the cards that you need in order to combo and what this combo results in. So Kiki Jiki plus Zealous Conscripts results in infinite creature tokens with haste, infinite enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield effects, infinite sack triggers, infinite death triggers. And then if you are at all confused about how a combo works, you can simply click on it to open it, and then it will show you the breakdown of the exact steps. So this is pretty simple when you have like a 2-card combo such as Kiki Jiki and Zealous Conscripts, but if you've got something that's more complicated, it'll break down the exact steps you need in order to execute it. So for example, in this combo, we're looking at Spellseeker, which tutors for a instant or sorcery that costs 2 or less. And this example provides all of the various combinations of cards that you need in order to go off, and then the exact step breakdown of how the combo is executed. And then finally, there is the CEDH deck list database, which houses deck lists that are already made for various high power commanders in the CEDH format. So this can show you the best commanders in white, blue, black, other combinations of colors. And for some of these, there will be one list, and for some of them, there will be multiple lists, and you can just tab these open. This will usually be a Moxfield link, and then it'll show you all the cards in the list, and then a lot of these lists also have primers on them to explain how they work. So this is a Najeela list made by Pongo, and it shows the exact breakdown of the deck, various card choices, what combos are in the deck and how they work, the different strategies of the deck, etc. So if you're looking to build your own decks, the CEDH Decklist database can be a good resource. And even if you're not interested in CEDH specifically, you can a lot of times, again, start with a list like this and then just trim out either the most out of budget cards or the most like combo centric cards and adjust the list to be more of a casual list if you're interested in that sort of thing. And that is how we will be proceeding with the various EDH lists in this series.